Hello my fellow oddities, welcome to a new video. Today I'll be doing another episode of Discord Suggestions, a series where you guys choose what videos I make. And if you want one of your ideas made into a video, then make sure to join my Discord server, link will be in the description below. Go to the Video Ideas channel and post whatever suggestion you have inside of there, and I will get to it at some point. But today I'll be taking an idea from Anubis, who suggests the most disappointing things about NetherRealm MK, or if you were to rewrite the NetherRealm MK story, how would it go?
Is it too much to ask for both?
So today, I'll be covering why the NetherRealm timeline is disappointing and how to fix it. And if you like this video, then you should definitely check out my future content. The easiest way to do that is by subscribing and turning on the bell notifications so you get notified when I upload a new video. And it would also be really nice if you gave this video a like and comment down below what the most disappointing thing about the NetherRealm timeline is for you. And remember, this is all my opinion, so if you absolutely love the NetherRealm timeline and you're not disappointed with it at all, then good for you. Don't come attacking me in the comments. In fact, I'd rather have a nice and civil discussion about why we disagree on certain things. Now, in this video, I'll be talking about my 3 biggest problems with the NetherRealm story modes and why I find certain issues with them. And then at the end of the video, I'll be talking about my solution to all of these problems. One solution that'll fix the whole thing. So definitely make sure to stick around for that because it's a pretty risky solution that I'm not sure NetherRealm would take because it goes against pretty much everything they've been doing for the past 11 years. So without further ado, let's get started with my first problem, the inconsistencies, retcons, and plot holes. Now up until Mortal Kombat 11, a lot of people actually really liked the NetherRealm stories. A lot of people were saying that they're very well told and put together and the best storylines in all of fighting games. But Mortal Kombat 11 changed things. Not only did people see the problems and flaws in that game, but it made them go back and see that it was always this messy and inconsistent. Now for me personally, I've never been one to rag on a movie or a TV show or video game having a story with lots of plot holes because a lot of the time I just feel like that's really petty and a lot of people just use it to fuel their own biases going into one of these stories that they have beforehand, and I just don't like it because it overshadows it having real issues like the plot or story being boring or predictable or the characters being unlikable. And I feel like having that mindset going into something would just ruin the experience for me. But I can't lie and say that there are never problems because sometimes they really do get under your skin and just like, why? Especially when it's something like a retcon in an established franchise that you really love. Mortal Kombat. So when you have things like Titans, which just straight up don't make any sense, or the new Sindel, it really just makes you frustrated because there were people who intended certain things with what they're doing in the story, and then for them to just go back and ruin that all would obviously make people upset. Now, what is the root of this problem? Why? Why does the NetherRealm team always make these little mistakes, these inconsistencies, plot holes, retcons? Well, I think there's a few different sources. Now, firstly, I got the chapter system. Now, a lot of people like to talk about the chapter system in regards to power scaling and how a character will beat 4 people in a row and then job the rest of the game. But I more so want to talk about what it does to the story. So there's about 16 different chapters in these games. That's 16 different characters that you play as. 16 different characters going on 16 completely different missions or quests or whatever. Which is basically 16 different subplots in one game. That's crazy. And it's not like a movie where you're jumping between subplots, like looking into this one and then going to this one and then going back to this one. No, you just go straight through. You go through a subplot and then go through another one and then another one and another. And they're all just completely different things. So I think that just has to add to how messy the story is and how the writers have to jump between completely different things constantly every 4 fights. The chapter system goes under a guise of being structured and organized when it actually just makes things way messier than it has to be. And of course, the most obvious source of all this is just simply bad writing. Now, I'm not saying I would do any better because given what they were, I would probably do much worse, but the point still stands that these games just on an inherent level aren't written very well. But you know, just at least make sure the writers, I don't know, have done the research. Like, make sure they not only know what's happening in this timeline, which they seem to struggle with already, but make sure that they remember what happened in the old timeline as well, so you don't like contradict stuff that has already been established by other people. Kind of important. But yeah, like I said, it's not all on the writing team. NetherRealm could just be doing an overall better job on making the structure of their stories easier for the writers to actually write the stories. But going on to my second problem, the NetherRealm timeline is just very predictable and boring. These games in the NetherRealm timeline just don't ever take any huge risks, at least not good ones. And that just results in the story just not being very interesting. Like, their ideas for new characters are a bunch of kid versions of characters we already know. Definitely the worst game for this was MKX. At least MK11 had Fire God Liu Kang. That's probably the biggest risk they've ever took in the entire timeline that actually paid off. And MK9 took a lot more risks, especially with the time travel and Sindel killing everyone in one room. Now, none of those risks were very good, but at least they tried. MKX did not try at all. Sure, MKX had a lot of new characters, but how many of them actually did something super crazy and unheard of in the Mortal Kombat universe? One. D'Vorah. And that sucked. Other than that, you just got jobbers, generic evil leader that turns good in the next game somehow. And like I said earlier, kid versions of characters we already know. But that's just the characters. Let's talk about the plot lines. Now, MK9 was not very risky at all because it was just a retelling of MK1 through 3 in the new story mode format, and also with some changes because of Raiden's time vision things. Of course, with that game, they took more and more risks as the game went on. There was MK1, which was just MK1. MK2 had a little more to it. There was stuff like Kung Lao dying, and then MK3 was just all out Sindel killing the whole cast, Raiden murdering Liu Kang and then killing Shao Kahn. Stuff like that. And then MKX was an original story, but it was so short and so like generic that it was just predictable the whole way through. I'm glad they didn't just do a retelling of MK4 because that would make the NetherRealm timeline super boring if it was just retellings of things we've already seen before. But the new story has to be good, and it just wasn't. And while MK11 was definitely the best out of the three when it comes to predictability and risks, because they have the whole time travel stuff, which I don't like. I don't like all those shenanigans, but whatever, in that aspect, it's definitely the best. It still did not take full use of what time travel could bring, which I'm almost semi-glad about because that probably would have made a lot more problems, but still, at the end of the day, it wasn't as unpredictable as it could have been. Now, what is the source of this problem? Well, I think it's pretty simple. It's the writers not being brave enough to actually do something different, and when they do something different, it's the wrong choice to make. That wasn't a good change. And another thing is that these are video games, and video games are meant to be played consistently over and over and over again. But these story modes are just basically movies, and while yes, there are some movies that are really, really rewatchable, these ones are not. But yeah, let's move on to problem number 3, aka my biggest problem, the characters. Now first, I want to start off with the OG trilogy characters and how they're treated in this new timeline. Now it's kind of hit or miss for these set of characters. It's sometimes they're super amazing and done justice, sometimes they're completely disrespected and changed into a completely different character, and then sometimes they're just jobbers there to exist. And that's pretty sad because every single Mortal Kombat character has potential. And while yes, the original trilogy characters have had most of their potential already tapped into, there's still more to go, especially for certain characters like Reptile. There's still so much to do with them. There's still so many characters that haven't had aspects of the story resolved. So just do that kind of stuff with them instead of just relegating them to the sidelines or just making them a completely different character that just sucks in comparison to what they were originally. And now the 3D era characters. Yeah. Besides for Kenshi, Quan Chi, and Fujin, I don't think any of the 3D era characters have gotten justice in the new timeline. Even the characters that have been playable, like Bo' Rai Cho, Tanya, and Frost. 2 of those are DLC characters, and Frost was turned into a cyborg, which could have been a cool idea, but they just did nothing with it. She could have been a human, and nothing would have changed besides her gameplay. And for the new characters in this timeline, while there are like 1 or 2 gems, maybe if that, a lot of them just straight up suck. Like, they need to go back to the drawing board, go back to the inspirations of MK, mythology, even pop culture, and use that to fuel new characters, because at the moment, it's pretty much just this.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! I mean, it's alright, like, I mean, it's alright, like. It's the biggest piece of dog shit. 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 I mean, it's alright, like. It's the biggest piece of dog shit. 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 It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
And let's do the guest characters, because why not?
It's the biggest piece of dog shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit. That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! I mean, it's alright, like. That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! I mean, it's alright, like. It's the biggest piece of dog shit. I mean, it's alright, like.
Now, what is the reason for all these characters being mistreated? Well, for the 3D era characters specifically, I think part of it is the same reason as last time, which is just the writers not being brave enough to include certain characters in the game that aren't like the MK2 characters. As for the original trilogy characters who are mistreated, like Ermac, Reptile, Noob Saibot, and to be honest, I have no idea why these characters with lots of potential that they do tap into like in their endings and stuff just aren't treated at all like how they are in those endings or how they were in the original timeline. As for the new characters, like I said, they just need to go back to the drawing board and actually give them big roles in the story instead of sidelining them for the original characters. But don't do it in a way that they overshadow the original characters, because having Cassie Cage just come in and beat Shinnok was stupid. Have them alongside the OG characters, and you can have a new character as your main character, just as long as you're not saying, oh, they're way more powerful than the originals and they're way better. No, don't do that. That's not going to make people like them. But now, you've gotten to the end of the video, so what is the big solution to all of this? What is the big solution to the chapter system and the plot holes? What is the big solution to the story being predictable and boring? And what is the solution to the characters being mistreated and not given the time they deserve? Well, I have a new story structure that NetherRealm should try out. No more having one big long story. No more of that. Instead, let's have some multiple Aftermath-sized stories. Because if you look at Aftermath, honestly, that storyline fixes a lot of the problems that I've talked about today. If you take Aftermath as its own thing, it's actually a really good story with not a lot of plot holes originating from Aftermath. Some of them do carry over from Mortal Kombat 11, but Mortal Kombat 11. Now, the reason I think Aftermath is so much better of a story than any of the other NetherRealm stories is because it focuses on one short story that focuses on one group of characters going on one journey. It's just Shang Tsung, Fujin, Nightwolf, Sindel, and Shiva going on their singular journey, while yes, meeting some of the other characters, but not jumping between another character story and another character story and just completely separate things. And that's what I think needs to happen. You have to have Aftermath-sized stories, but for different groups of characters. And since these are perspectives from different characters, then you can have the evil characters, the villains, have their own little story mode, which would be really cool. And it's kind of similar to the old timeline, specifically the 3D era, where a lot of characters were just in groups, going on their own separate journeys that ended up converging into one thing. This would also allow for more world building within the NetherRealm timeline, because there hasn't really been a lot of that. Since you have different characters going on different journeys and different perspectives, then you can have different parts of the world being explored. And one more thing that I'd like to add to this structure is more choices within the story. In Mortal Kombat 11, for certain chapters, you can choose between two characters to play as, but it doesn't really have any big consequences depending on what character you choose. It's kind of just like, oh, you choose this character, you get a different cutscene. Hooray. But what if there were some minor, not completely huge changes, but just some small changes to the story that could actually happen through certain characters being chosen over others? For example, this is a completely hypothetical scenario. I know this would never happen in the actual canon story, so just bear with me here. Say, Kuai Liang and Bi-Han, as their Sub-Zero selves, were walking through a forest, and then they came across Reptile, and Reptile was like, yeah, I don't like you guys. And so you can choose between Kuai Liang or Bi-Han to step forward and fight. If Kuai Liang steps forward and fights Reptile, then he spares his life. Bi-Han comes forward, yeah. So see, that's a minor change in the story. Well, I guess the death of a character isn't too minor, but at the same time, it's Reptile, so like, is it really that big of a deal? But I'm just saying, depending on the character you choose, or even some other choice like having a completely different character join a mission with you. So you can choose between either having Liu Kang and Kung Lao, or Liu Kang and Kai. I don't know why I thought of Kai, that was just the first Shaolin that I could think of. And you could have one of those two groups of people fight some random dude. And those choices would create different consequences that would actually influence the story going forward. I know that would be a lot to do, but with the storylines being shorter, probably around Aftermath size or a little shorter than that, I think it is doable. But yeah, I really like this structure of story, and I wish NetherRealm would do it, but they're probably not going to because they'd rather have their big stories, because that's part of their selling point. Which is sad, because this structure fixes all of the problems I had. The inconsistencies and plot holes because of the chapter system and other aspects and it being messy. It fixes that because these are shorter contained stories that aren't going to be super hectic with different plot lines and stuff. It fixes it being too predictable or boring by having different options for different characters that you can choose to go on missions with you, or choose to fight someone, or having completely different consequences for your actions happening later on in the story. And it fixes the certain characters not having the treatment they deserve by giving every single character a chance to be in the spotlight, with them being in their little groups and them having more contained character development, where you can have more character development because there's a smaller group of characters, as opposed to a giant cast of characters where you have to develop a little for each character, or just like develop certain characters a lot and certain others just get nothing. But yeah, what do you guys think of my solution? Comment down below. But yeah, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and check out my socials like Instagram and Twitter in the description below, and also join my Discord server so you can give me your ideas for me to make. But with that being said, that's it for this video, my fellow Wannabes. I'll see you next time.